Namaste. Welcome to our 89th talk on the Bhagavad Gita. In the final chapter, the 18th chapter of the Gita, it talked about the different duties which express the qualities, the swabhava of the various castes. So Krishna continues, satisfied in his own duty. The word fulfilled is also correct. In fact, it's implied there. So it means when we act according to our swabhava, our self nature, we are content and literally fulfilled by it. In other words, it makes us stronger, makes us more true to ourselves, and therefore moves us closer to the ultimate realization of ourself. Satisfied in his own duty, a man attains perfection, siddhi. In other words, which also means complete. Hear how he who is happy in his own duty, that means both contented and feeling good, his swakarma finds perfection. By worshiping with his swakarma, him from whom all beings have their origin, by whom all this universe is pervaded, a man finds perfection. In other words, we can pray to God, we can go to temples, we can make offerings to God, or do all kinds of things that we say we think God wants us to do. Fine. But we should understand that this is literally worshiping. Now, the word worshiping comes from is upasana, and it means drawing near to. It's very much reflected in the Greek of the New Testament, in fact. In other words, it means coming near to who we really are and to the ultimate reality of ourselves, which is the absolute, Brahman itself, from which we are inseparable. So, by Dharma, we worship God. Many people go to temples. They spend fabulous sums of money, even elaborate worship. They give all kinds of things for the image. They may donate jewelry to be put on the image, fabulous clothing, even cloth of gold, literally, and all this kind of thing. This kind of material thing. But the truth is, the real worship is following our swadharma by performing our swakarma, the action that comes deep from within us, which is our true action from our true self. By worshiping with his swakarma, him from whom all beings have their origin. In other words, there's nobody that's the origin for anything except God. Therefore, in one sense, all relations with anything besides God is just part of the dream, part of the Maya, part of the illusion, which is necessary. But the ultimate relationship, the ultimate worship is with God. And we can't do it if we don't free our own inner nature by the action that is consistent and which will ultimately reveal that nature. And of course, God is pervading all the universe. So we're living and moving in God, and we're going according to the nature, the ultimate nature of everything. Sorry. So then, a man finds perfection. Again, Krishna says. Better is one's own swadharma though imperfect, than another swadharma, though well performed. That's very important too, because it's natural for us to pay attention to other people and to notice other people. And sometimes when we admire someone, well, a child says, the boy especially, with the father, of course, has a profession, often says, when I grow up, I'm going to do what my daddy does. If he works in a factory, I'm going to work in a factory. So it is wanting to reflect and be what exactly the archetype is, and in that case, it's your very own parent. So this is an important thing. In other words, we, we we must follow the innate pattern, and that's what the swadharma and swakarma is. Performing the duty prescribed by one's own swabhava produces no fault. Now, you may be not perfect in following the duty, but it never will be a wrong thing to do. And don't pay attention to other people if they want to interrupt you in your swadharma. A lot of people told me how wrong it would be for me to become a monk. And especially the big specter that the way things turned out, I was the last male in our family line, which is a long line. You can trace it back very, very far. And had some admirable people on it, and I'm sure unadmirable, though I didn't know any. But somewhere, in fact, I came from a family of saints for the last, say, three generations. And the whole family thing was going to end. I had a huge family. My grandparents had 15 children, only four males, two of whom died young. And there was just my Uncle John and my father. My Uncle John had one child, a daughter. And my father had been me. So everybody in the family thought, okay, this is the one who carries it on. This boy is the future of our family. And we had strong, strong family bonds. So when it was learned, no marriage, that's the end of the family line. In fact, in discussing this, my father said to me, well, you're going to become an outcast from the family. No one will want to have anything to do with you. And I callously said, well, what I need to do, I need to do. And so I did. However, they didn't cast me out. So he continues, the duty to which one is born, but the word means inborn, the duty to which it's already inside you. You came out of the womb. A crook comes out of the womb, a crook. Oh, I know we like to talk about environment versus heredity. Forget it. It's karma, swakarma, swabhava. That's what does it. Society doesn't touch it, except society may reflect your karma, but your karma puts you in that society. The duty to which one is born or is inborn should not be abandoned, although deficient. In other words, it doesn't mean, sorry, it means you're carrying, even though the carrying out of that dharma is not absolutely perfect and has some flaws and defects, even parts missing, still, that should not be abandoned. You don't give up. You do the best you can, and then you realize I may not do it perfectly because Krishna continues, For all undertakings are enveloped by defects, just as fire is by smoke. In other words, you are going to fail. It's natural. You are going to not come up to any great high mark. That's natural. But he who follows his Dharma will find himself strengthened, truly empowered, and awakened so that he can do better than those who are not striving. In other words, those who are not yogis. He whose intellect is unattached. In other words, your true thoughts, your real thinking, your intelligence, your insight, cannot be shaken by what anybody does or any situation coming from outside. You know what you know, you are what you are, therefore you will do what you do. Whose lower self is subdued. In other words, it's like, oh, well, I'd like this, or that'll be hard to do, and so on. The person who, if you tell them about spiritual things, they say, that'd be so difficult. Don't say a word more. Say, well, if it doesn't suit you, don't. There is no use feeling compassion for someone who will not have compassion for themselves and save themselves. So then, the lower self is subdued, from whom desire has departed. Now, that's a high state. But desire for desire should, if it first is there, like, I don't want to have all this, oh, I want, so I gotta have, so I don't want these compulsions. That's the first step to being freed from it. By renunciation. Renunciation doesn't mean monastic renunciation, it means letting go. And if something doesn't want to let it go, then kicking it away, knocking it away from you. He attains a supreme state of freedom from action, and it says from karma. There is then no more karma for him because karma as a force exists, but he's gone beyond that energy into consciousness. Learn from me in brief how one who has attained perfection also attains Brahman, that supreme state of knowledge, because being a perfect human being, which means being a totally dharmic human being, is not the same as attaining the absolute. Well, that is the supreme state. Endowed with a supremely pure, Vishuddha, perfectly pure intellect. In other words, a mind that doesn't have a cloud on it. It doesn't even have a trace of smoke. There isn't even a little bit of a dark spot or a vague or veiled spot, but rather all that would impede has been completely removed. Just like you have something that's dirty, you wash it, the dirt's gone, and it looks like it was originally. So we go back to our true home in a sense. We go back to that pure state we had before we fell into the mud puddle of the world. Controlling the lower self by firmness. You can't be firm if you haven't got a hold of it. So a yogi is completely in charge of his physical, mental, psychic, and intellectual natures. Yoga is what does it. The non-yogi can't do it. The non-yogi can be in charge maybe for 50 years and then bang, away, or he falls. So, and it also means steadfastness. In other words, steadfast in purpose. Turning from the objects of the senses. That means in your heart, inwardly. In other words, Yeah, obviously you can't stop seeing, you can't stop hearing, but you can not be oriented toward it. You don't have an affinity in a sense of a magnetic pull toward it. You are truly, even psychologically and psychically, separate from it. Beginning with Shabda, and that embraces the idea of thinking because it's just subtle talking when you think, and what is told to you and what is spoken to you, and then all the rest: hearing, sight, touch, taste. All of the things of the senses, whether psychologically or physical, you are rid of them in a sense that you can master them and you can actually touch and control them, but they can't touch and control you. This is the important thing. So, casting off both attraction and aversion, because those who say, "Oh, I hate that," "Oh, that's evil," and "Oh, yes," "Oh, he just hates alcohol." Well, he no doubt will end up drinking it. Because you see, aversion is focused on the object of aversion and means there's an affinity to the aversion. There's an interesting object lesson in Federico Fellini's motion picture. He used to be the word in sort of high level motion pictures. Maybe now people don't even know his name. But anyway, he made one called Julieta of the Spirits. The basic idea is this woman compensated for her loneliness and what she felt was her deficiency by living in a fantasy world peopled by fantasy productions. And she saw them and she heard them. And at the very end of the motion picture, she's grown enough that she's leaving this behind. And they call out and say, "Julieta, Julieta." And she says, "I don't need you anymore." That's it too. It isn't just like, "Oh, I want it, but I'm denying it to myself. It is, "I don't need you." But also there's not, "I dislike." It is in a sense is I've moved into another dimension and you don't exist there and you're irrelevant there. That is the way. That is the way of the yogi. Dwelling in a solitary place. Now, we have to live in neighborhoods. We have to live in apartment houses. Remember, Krishna spoke this when the world population was very small, when even though it was an incredible civilization, yet it was easy to, there weren't megalopolises, there weren't these gigantic cities of millions and millions. So even if you lived in a major center of commerce and learning and so on, uh, first of all, you could either find a quiet neighborhood or you could just go up, say half a mile, and you were quiet. Now, Yogananda Ji tells in his autobiography how when he met the great master Ram Gopal Mazumdar, when he was running away from the ashram of his guru Sri Teshwa, uh, the great yogi said to him, "Do you have a room in the ashram where you can be alone?" He said, "Yes." He said, "That's your Himalayan cave. You go, you meditate there. You will realize." And he followed the advice and he found out it was true. So we should live somewhat solitary, not everyday party, everyday people around us. I mean, if we go to work with people around us, but when we can go home, oh yes, we can have friends. But there should be time when there's nobody there but us. Now, when you have a family, that's basically impossible. But I've known of yogis who would say, okay, now this is my time. And they would go and there'd just be a room and they'd stay in the room for a while. When I say, wow, it might only be a couple of hours and meditate. You know, I've known husband and wife to trade off, you know, look after the children while the other one's meditating. See, there's a wonderful adage, and not even in the Sanskrit scriptures, in English, where there's a will, there's a way. If you want to do it, you'll be able to do it. Those who say I can't are those who say I won't. So dwelling in a solitary place, no yogi should be utterly absorbed in social life, for sure. Eating lightly, in other words, not cramming the food in. Also, food that is not does not make the mind heavy, dark, and coarse. In other words, no meat, nothing contain any animal derivatives whatsoever, and I mean whatsoever, and no medications containing any animal derivatives whatsoever. And eating things that are easily digested, not difficult to the body. I've heard people say, oh, I like so and so, but doesn't like me, but I still have to keep on eating it. That's not the way of the yogi. So even the food should never be an impediment. That's what is meant. And at the same time, don't be obsessed with food. There are certain people practicing false yogas, especially so-called Raja yoga, that become incredibly greedy and incredibly involved with food because by overstimulation of the pranas, they activate the digestive pranas and they become more hungry than ordinary people. And then they think about what they're going to have all the time, or they talk about it. With speech, body, and mind controlled. Well, I shouldn't need to explain that. That's pretty obvious. Constantly devoted to yoga meditation. That means when not meditating, doing japa. Because japa is the cord that unites both in and outside of meditation, and you keep that vibration going, and it keeps building up in your body and in your mind, especially in the mental energies. So when you go to meditate, you can meditate. Not, oh, well, I've got to read a little bit of inspiration, sing a little song, recite some mantras, pranam mantras, and so on. They're called. No, you should be able to go there, sit down, boom. Doesn't mean you're heights of meditation because you're just starting, but you're right there on the path and up and in you go. So that's how you're constantly devoted to. You're devoted to yoga by living every moment in the way that is most conducive and facilitates yoga. Yoga meditation. Taking refuge in vairagya. Vairagya is detachment and disinterest in relation to things because you see through them. You see their nature. Or you see that even if they're necessary to some degree, you have to be careful they don't catch a hold of you and pull you into them. And you simply become an embodiment of fulfillment of these things, even good and positive things. There's um, Swami Sri used to say, too much of a good thing is no longer good. Too much spiritual reading would keep you from meditation, isn't it good? And going in the room and doing nothing, you don't clean your house if you're living alone, and you don't fulfill your duties, including to your family, if you have a family, that's fake too. That's not good. I've known that too. Men, especially, they have this idea, and oh, my wife pulls my mind down. Oh, really? Oh, my children, they make noise. Oh, I'm such a Mahayogi. I knew one of these Mahayogis. Oh, it's like this. Oh, my wife is really such lesser than I am, and she's only being a yogi because of me. And da-da, da-da. You know what he did? He had four of the most wonderful children. I mean, they were fantastic children. In fact, I taught them how to meditate. His wife was, she was one of my dearest friends. He abandoned them all. He got himself a Porsche, yeah, and roared around in the more sophisticated parts of Los Angeles and lived an immoral and indecent life and became ultimately nothing. Because you see, when you follow that, it says in the Bible, you can't take fire in your bosom and not be burnt. Fire burns you up and turns you into ash. And that's what he became ultimately. He was just like a heap of ashes. Therefore, Vairagya, seeing through it, seeing that skull and crossbones on the body, on the bottle, and yes, and on the body, yourself and others, uh, avoid, beware. So, as usual, over the time, but we shall, as the British like to say, soldier on. So, until the next time, try to keep in mind